Welcome to Marple Whispers. I'm Sean. Tell me, where are you listening from right now? And what time is it there? I'd love to know. Share it in the comments along with how you liked the story. I reply to every single one of you. Now let's step into the mystery. In the haunting shadows of Rome, where ancient ruins pulse with deadly secrets, Miss Jane Marple steps off a train into a city teeming with danger. On the vibrant Via del Corso, a scream pierces the twilight. A shady antiquities dealer collapses by the Trevi fountain, blood gushing, his final whisper, the eagle's eye. Death stalks her eclectic tour group as bodies fall. A witness poisoned amid the forum's crumbling stones, a cyanide-laced wineglass shattering in the Pantheon's sacred hush. A scaffold crashing under moonlight in a chilling near miss. Suspicion coils around an obsessive archaeologist, his cunning wife with a hidden vial, a nervous artist sketching deadly clues, his Vatican-tied fiancée with secrets of her own, and a shady businessman tangled in forged relics. With her razor-sharp village instincts, Miss Marple unravels a sinister web of greed, blackmail, and a smuggler's hoard buried in Rome's catacombs. Who wields the stolen, emerald-encrusted dagger? Who poisons with a chemist's precision? In a pulse-pounding climax, betrayal ignites, exposing a plot worth millions in ancient treasures. Can Miss Marple unmask the killer before they strike again? Plunge into this Agatha Christie-style thriller, where Rome's eternal beauty cloaks a heart-stopping dance with death. Chapter 1. The Eternal City's Shadow. The clatter of the train wheels gave way to a symphony of voices and footsteps as Miss Jane Marple alighted at Roma Termini, her small suitcase in one hand and a knitted shawl draped over her arm. The station was a whirlwind of activity. Tourists clutching maps, vendors hawking espresso, and the occasional pickpocket weaving through the crowd with practiced ease. At 78, Miss Marple moved with a deceptive fragility, her sharp blue eyes missing nothing beneath the brim of her sensible hat. Rome, the eternal city, sprawled before her like a living tapestry of history and haste, its ancient stones whispering secrets amid the modern clamour. She had come at the insistence of her dear friend Lady Constance Hargreaves, whose letter had arrived in St. Mary Mead like a summons from another world. "Darling Jane," it read, "the doctors prescribed sunshine and ruins for my weary soul after poor Edmund's departure. Join our little tour. It's all arranged. You'll adore the intrigue of it all." Miss Marple had smiled at that. Intrigue, in her experience, often arrived uninvited. Now, spotting Constance's elegant figure amid the throng, her silver hair impeccably coiffed, a string of pearls glinting in the afternoon light, she felt a twinge of anticipation. "Jane, my dear, how marvellous you look!" Constance exclaimed, embracing her lightly. "Ish! Group awaits at the Hotel Imperial. Such an eclectic bunch. You'll have them all figured out by tea time." The hotel lobby was a haven of polished marble and frescoed ceilings, overlooking the bustling Piazza della Repubblica. As Miss Marple settled into a plush armchair with a cup of Earl Grey, she surveyed her fellow travellers with the quiet acuity of one who had unravelled many a village knot. First, there was Dr. Elias Thornton, a tall, bespectacled archaeologist in his late 60s, his tweed jacket dusted with what might have been excavation dirt or merely affectation. He paced the room, gesturing animatedly about the forum's latest digs, his voice booming with scholarly zeal. Beside him sat his wife Miriam, a striking woman of 50-odd years with raven hair pulled into a severe chignon and eyes that darted like a hawk's. She fiddled with a gold locket at her throat. Her collection of rare artifacts, Etruscan brooches and Roman coins, displayed proudly in a velvet case on the table. Miss Marple noted how Miriam's gaze lingered a fraction too long on the young man across the room, as if appraising more than his talent. That young man was Oliver Blake, an aspiring artist in his mid-20s, his tousled curls and paint-stained fingers marking him as the romantic type. He hunched over a sketchbook, capturing the lobby's ornate chandelier with swift strokes, oblivious to the world, or so it seemed. His fiancée, Sophia Rossi, hovered nearby, a vivacious Roman beauty with olive skin and a cascade of dark waves. Her family, she confided in a lilting accent, held minor posts in the Vatican archives, granting her access to hidden wonders. Sophia's laughter rang out like bells, but Miss Marple detected a shadow in her eyes, perhaps the weight of old family expectations. Completing the ensemble was Reginald Forbes, a portly businessman in a tailored suit, his face flushed from the heat or perhaps the cigar. He puffed discreetly by the window. He funded much of the tour, he boasted, for the cultural deductions it afforded his accounts back in London. Yet his hand trembled ever so slightly as he struck a match, and Miss Marple wondered if it was merely age or something more. A debt unpaid, a secret harboured. The group exchanged pleasantries, but beneath the surface, currents swirled. A barbed comment from Miriam about Oliver's frivolous doodles, a forced smile from Reginald when Sophia mentioned her uncle's antiquities shop. It all reminded Miss Marple of the parish teas back home, where smiles masked sharper intents. As dusk painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, the party ventured out for a leisurely passeggiata along the Via del Corso. The street pulsed with life. Fashionable shoppers, street performers juggling fire, the aroma of roasting chestnuts mingling with exhaust from passing Vespers. Miss Marple walked arm in arm with Constance, her steps measured, absorbing the city's rhythm. Such vitality, she murmured, yet one senses the layers, like an onion. Peel one back, and there's always another beneath. They paused at the Fontana di Trevi, its baroque splendour illuminated against the gathering night. Tourists tossed coins over shoulders, wishing for returns to this enchanted place. Sophia regaled them with tales of Neptune's chariot, her voice animated, while Oliver sketched furiously. Dr. Thornton pointed out carvings with academic precision, and Reginald checked his pocket watch impatiently. Miriam stood apart, her expression inscrutable, fingering that locket again. Then, without warning, a sharp cry shattered the evening calm. It came from a narrow alley, branching off the main thoroughfare, where shadows clung like forgotten sins. The group froze as a figure stumbled into view. A man in a rumpled suit, clutching his chest, blood seeping through his fingers. He collapsed near the fountain's edge, his eyes wide with shock, gurgling something indistinct before going still. Screams erupted from bystanders. A woman fainted into her companion's arms. Chaos ensued. Reginald barked for a doctor, while Dr. Thornton knelt beside the victim, feeling for a pulse. "He's gone," he announced grimly. Sophia gasped, covering her mouth. "That's Carlo Moretti. My uncle knew him, an antiquities dealer from Trastevere." Oliver's sketchbook slipped from his grasp, pages fluttering open to reveal intricate drawings of ancient daggers and vases. Miriam turned pale, her hand instinctively reaching for her case of relics. The carabinieri arrived in a flurry of sirens and uniforms, cordoning off the area with efficient authority. A wound in the chest, they noted, a single precise stab from what appeared to be a slender blade. No weapon in sight, no immediate witnesses save the milling crowd. Miss Marple stood back, her mild demeanour belying the whir of her mind. The boldness of it all, a killing in plain view amid the revelry. It put her in mind of that dreadful incident in St. Mary Mead, when the greengrocer met his end over a disputed inheritance, his body left brazenly by the village pump. People assume safety in numbers, she thought, but crowds can hide the darkest deeds. As the group was herded back to the hotel under police escort, questions hung unspoken in the air. Who was Carlo Moretti truly, and what connection bound him to their little circle? Miss Marple retired to her room, unpacking her knitting with deliberate care. The Eternal City had cast its shadow, and she sensed this was but the first thread in a tapestry of treachery. Chapter 2. Whispers Among the Ruins. The morning sun bathed the Hotel Imperial in a golden glow, casting long shadows across the breakfast room where Miss Jane Marple sat with her tea and toast, her knitting bag nestled beside her chair. The view of the Colosseum through the tall windows was breathtaking, its weathered arches standing sentinel over Rome's ceaseless pulse. Yet the mood among the tour group was anything but serene. The brutal stabbing of Carlo Moretti the previous evening hung over them like a storm cloud, and the clink of cutlery against porcelain seemed to underscore their unease. Miss Marple's mild blue eyes darted from face to face, noting the subtle tells of human nature she had so often observed in St. Mary Mead. The twitch of a lip, the avoidance of a glance, the too casual gesture. Lady Constance Hargreaves, ever the optimist, attempted to lighten the atmosphere with talk of their planned visit to the Roman Forum. "We mustn't let this tragedy spoil our adventure," she said, her voice bright but strained. Dr. Elias Thornton, seated opposite, barely looked up from his espresso, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the table. His wife, Miriam, buttered her croissant with excessive precision, her dark eyes flitting toward Oliver Blake, who sat sketching the Colosseum with feverish intensity. Sophia Rossi, pale and subdued, stirred her cappuccino absently, her engagement ring glinting as it caught the light. Reginald Forbes, red-faced and rumpled, muttered about the inconvenience of police interviews, his cigar absent this morning, a sign, Miss Marple thought, of rattled nerves. The arrival of Inspector Luca Bianchi interrupted their strained civility. He was a compact man in his 40s, his moustache impeccably trimmed, his dark suit pressed to perfection despite the early hour. His presence commanded the room, and even Dr. Thornton's bluster quieted as Bianchi addressed them. "Signore e signori," he began, his English accented but precise. "Carlo Moretti was no ordinary antiquities dealer. Our investigations confirm he trafficked in stolen relics, some of which passed through Rome's black market. One of you may have known him better than you claim." A murmur rippled through the group. Sophia's teaspoon clattered against her saucer. "My uncle dealt with Signor Moretti years ago," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But only for legitimate pieces, Etruscan pottery, nothing more." Bianchi's eyes narrowed, and Miss Marple noted how Sophia's hands twisted in her lap, much like young Elsie's had when questioned about a missing pie in the village. Guilt or merely fear? Oliver, meanwhile, clutched his sketchbook protectively. Bianchi's gaze fell on it, and he requested to see the open page. Reluctantly, Oliver revealed a detailed drawing of an ornate dagger, its hilt encrusted with what looked like emeralds. "I sketched it at the Capitoline Museum exhibit 2 days ago," he said quickly. "It's just a study." Bianchi's eyebrow arched. This dagger matches the murder weapon stolen from that very exhibit yesterday morning." Oliver flushed, stammering, "I had nothing to do with it." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly as she knitted, her mind turning over the coincidence. A stolen dagger, a public murder, boldness or desperation? Dr. Thornton cleared his throat. "If I may, Inspector, I overheard Moretti arguing with Forbes last week at a cafe near the Pantheon. Something about a disputed vase, an Etruscan piece, I believe." Reginald's face darkened. "Nonsense! The man tried to swindle me with a fake. I told him to take his wares elsewhere." Bianchi jotted a note, and Miss Marple observed the flicker of unease in Reginald's eyes. He reminded her of Mr. Hodgkins, the St. Mary Mead butcher, who had protested too loudly when accused of shortchanging customers. As the group prepared to depart for the forum, Miss Marple lingered, watching Miriam slip a small glass vial into her handbag. The label was in Italian, but the word acido caught her eye. Perfume, perhaps? Yet the bottle's clinical design suggested otherwise. Miss Marple recalled a case in her village where a chemist's assistant had misused a similar vial, with dire consequences. She made a mental note to keep an eye on Mrs. Thornton. The Roman Forum was a labyrinth of crumbling columns and sun-bleached stones, its grandeur softened by time. Dr. Thornton led the group with the zeal of a man in his element, expounding on the Basilica Aemilia's history while gesturing at half-buried mosaics. Sophia trailed behind, her earlier vivacity replaced by a haunted look. Oliver sketched the ruins, his pencil moving with nervous energy, while Reginald lagged, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. Miriam, ever observant, examined a fragment of carved marble with undue interest, her fingers brushing it as if assessing its value. At noon, as they paused near the Arch of Titus, a commotion erupted nearby. A crowd had gathered around a gelato cart, where a street vendor lay writhing on the ground, his face contorted in agony. The smell of almonds hung in the air, a telltale sign of cyanide. By the time the paramedics arrived, the man was dead. Bianchi, summoned to the scene, revealed a chilling detail. The vendor Giovanni Russo had been at the Trevi Fountain the previous night and claimed to have seen the killer's silhouette. "Poisoned gelato," the inspector said grimly. "Someone ensured his silence." The group recoiled. Sophia clutched Oliver's arm, her eyes wide with fear. "This is madness," she whispered. Dr. Thornton's face was ashen, his earlier bravado gone. Miriam's hand tightened around her handbag, and Miss Marple's needles paused mid-stitch. 2 deaths in 2 days, both linked to the group's orbit. It was like that dreadful affair in St. Mary Mead, when the vicar's niece and her suitor both succumbed to poisoned preserves. The key, Miss Marple mused, is always in the connections. As they returned to the hotel, Bianchi shared another clue. A witness reported Moretti's last words as l'occhio dell'aquila, the eagle's eye. The phrase puzzled the group, but Miss Marple's mind turned to a riddle from her village, where a cryptic phrase had hidden a smuggler's cache. Could it be an artifact, a place, or something more personal? She resolved to observe the group closely at dinner, where tensions were sure to surface. That evening, in the hotel's dining room, the atmosphere was brittle. Reginald drank heavily, his usual bluster replaced by sullen silence. Dr. Thornton argued with Miriam over a minor detail about Roman aqueducts, his voice sharp with irritation. Oliver and Sophia sat close, their hands entwined, but Miss Marple noticed Oliver's eyes darting to Miriam whenever she spoke. Something unspoken passed between them, a secret perhaps, or a shared fear. As the meal ended, Miss Marple lingered over her coffee, her knitting a pretext for eavesdropping. she overheard Miriam whisper to Oliver, "We must be careful. They're watching." Oliver nodded, his expression grim. Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to the vial, the dagger, the poisoned gelato. The Eternal City was revealing its darker side, and she sensed the threads of motive. Greed, betrayal, fear were weaving a pattern only she could unravel. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Vatican. The Vatican museums shimmered with an almost sacred hush as Miss Jane Marple and her fellow travellers entered the grand halls, their footsteps echoing on polished marble floors. The morning light filtered through high windows, illuminating frescoes and sculptures that had witnessed centuries of devotion and intrigue. Miss Marple, her shawl draped neatly over her shoulders, moved with the quiet grace of one accustomed to observing rather than being observed. Her knitting bag hung at her side, a comforting weight, though her sharp blue eyes were far from idle. The events of the past 2 days, the stabbing of Carlo Moretti and the poisoning of the street vendor Giovanni Russo, had cast a pall over the tour, and the grandeur of the Sistine Chapel felt like a stage for secrets yet to be unveiled. Sophia Rossi, their unofficial guide, led the group with a practiced air, her voice soft but authoritative as she described the intricate tapestries lining the gallery of maps. Her connection to the Vatican archives lent her an insider's knowledge, but today her usual vivacity was dimmed, her dark eyes shadowed by the weight of suspicion. The police had questioned her thoroughly about her uncle's dealings with Moretti, and though she had been released, whispers lingered among the group. Miss Marple noted how Sophia's fingers toyed with her engagement ring, a nervous habit not unlike that of young Clara in St. Mary Mead, who had fidgeted similarly when hiding a lover's letter. Dr. Elias Thornton strode ahead, his tweed jacket slightly askew, pausing to lecture on the historical significance of a Roman bust. His enthusiasm seemed forced, his eyes darting to his wife, Miriam, who trailed behind, her attention fixed on a display of ancient jewellery. Miriam's severe chignon and sharp features gave her an air of calculated elegance, but Miss Marple had not forgotten the vial, marked Ashido. She had seen Miriam tuck into her handbag. Was it merely a cosmetic, or something more sinister? Oliver Blake, sketching as always, hovered near Sophia, his pencil capturing the curve of a golden chalice, though his glances toward Miriam suggested a distraction beyond art. Reginald Forbes, meanwhile, lagged at the rear, his florid face betraying a sleepless night. His usual bluster was muted, replaced by a distracted air that Miss Marple recognized from a St. Mary Mead banker caught in a financial scandal. As the group approached the Cortile della Pigna, a secluded courtyard framed by ancient pines, Miss Marple noticed Reginald slip into a side corridor. Excusing herself to adjust her shawl, she followed at a discreet distance, her steps muffled by the thick carpets. Through a half-open door, she glimpsed him speaking in hushed tones to a man in a dark suit, his face obscured by shadow. Their exchange was brief, a folded paper passing between them before Reginald rejoined the group, his expression taut. Miss Marple filed the incident away, recalling a similar clandestine meeting in her village that had unravelled a smuggling ring. People are careless, she thought, when they think no one watches. Lunch was taken at a charming trattoria near St. Peter's Square, its tables adorned with checkered cloths and vases of fresh basil. The group sat under a canopy of vines, the clink of glasses and murmur of conversation blending with the distant toll of bells. Dr. Thornton held forth on the Etruscans, his voice carrying a zeal that bordered on obsession. "These artifacts are more than relics," he declared, gesturing with his fork. "They hold power, men have killed for less. Miriam's lips tightened, and she shot him a look that could have chipped marble. Sophia, seated beside Oliver, picked at her insalata caprese, her attention caught by a folded note slipped under her plate by a passing waiter. She read it quickly, her face paling, and tucked it into her sleeve. Miss Marple, sipping her aqua mineral, caught the words "the dagger points" scrawled in elegant script before the note disappeared. A clue or a threat. It reminded her of a coded message left in a hymn book that had once exposed a village blackmailer. As the meal progressed, tension simmered. Oliver's hand brushed Sophia's, but his eyes strayed to Miriam, who returned his glance with a fleeting intensity. Reginald, nursing a glass of Chianti, muttered about damned police meddling and avoided Sophia's gaze. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly in her lap, a rhythmic counterpoint to her thoughts. The dagger, stolen from the Capitoline exhibit, was no random choice. Its emerald-encrusted hilt suggested wealth and motive. And the cyanide that had silenced Giovanni Russo. It pointed to someone with access and cunning. She recalled a St. Mary Mead chemist who had once misused his stock for personal gain, and wondered if Dr. Thornton's expertise in ancient toxins might extend beyond academia. The afternoon tour resumed in the Raphael rooms, where the vivid frescoes seemed to mock the group's unease. Inspector Luca Bianchi joined them briefly, his moustache twitching as he shared a new detail. Moretti's dying words, "Locchio dell'Aquila," referred to an ancient Roman symbol, possibly linked to a hidden vault or relic. The group exchanged uneasy glances, and Miss Marple noted Dr. Thornton's sudden stillness, as if the phrase struck a chord. An eagle's eye, she mused, like the carved stone in Mrs. Eldridge's garden, hiding a stolen locket. Could it be a physical object, or a metaphor for something or someone watching? As evening approached, Miss Marple excused herself to rest in the hotel lounge, but her true intention was to observe. From a corner armchair, she watched Oliver slip out toward the Tiber River, his sketchbook under his arm. Donning her coat, she followed at a distance, her frail form blending into the twilight crowds. The river's banks glittered with reflected lights, and Oliver paused on the Ponte Sisto, scanning the shadows. A figure emerged, Miriam Thornton, her scarf pulled tight against the evening chill. Their conversation was too low to hear, but Miriam's gesture was sharp, her hand slicing the air as she spoke. Oliver handed her a rolled-up sketch, and she tucked it into her coat before they parted. Returning to the hotel, Miss Marple confided in Lady Constance over a glass of sherry. "It's like that affair with the churchwarden's ledgers," she murmured. "Secrets hidden in plain sight, passed from hand to hand." Constance raised an eyebrow. "You think young Oliver's involved?" Miss Marple shook her head gently. "Not necessarily the killer, but entangled, like a fly in a web." The eagle's eye, the dagger, the vial, each was a thread in a tapestry of greed and betrayal, and Miss Marple knew the pattern would soon emerge, as it always did in the quiet corners of human nature. Chapter 4. The Midnight Rendezvous. The Roman night pulsed with an electric unease, the Tiber's dark waters swallowing the city's lights in a restless shimmer. Miss Jane Marple, her heart quickening beneath her prim exterior, moved through the shadows like a spectre, her sensible shoes whispering against the ancient cobblestones of the Ponte Sisto. She trailed Oliver Blake, whose hurried steps and darting glances betrayed a man on the edge of a precipice. At 78, Miss Marple's frail form belied the steel of her resolve, honed by countless unravellings of St. Mary Mead's darkest secrets. The murders of Carlo Moretti and Giovanni Russo had tightened a noose around the tour group, and tonight, Oliver's clandestine errand promised to pull it tighter still. The day had been a crucible of suspicion. The cryptic note to Sophia, the dagger points, and Inspector Bianchi's revelation of Moretti's dying words, L'occhio dell'Aquila, had left the group teetering on the brink of panic. The Vatican's hallowed halls had felt like a stage for betrayal, with Reginald's furtive meeting and Miriam's concealed vial casting long shadows. Miss Marple had feigned exhaustion to retire early, but from her window overlooking the Piazza della Repubblica, she had seen Oliver slip into the night, his sketchbook gripped like a talisman. Like young Tommy, creeping to the mill with stolen letters, she thought, her mind flashing to a village scandal that had ended in blood. Donning her coat, she followed, her pulse thrumming with the thrill of pursuit. On the bridge, Oliver halted, his breath clouding in the chill air, his silhouette tense against the Tiber's gleam. A figure emerged from the darkness. Miriam Thornton, her raven hair half hidden by a silk scarf, her movements sharp as a blade. Miss Marple shrank behind a stone balustrade, her breath shallow, the night's chill seeping into her bones. Miriam's voice was a low hiss, slicing through the silence. "It's unravelling, Oliver. The vase. Millions if we hold our nerve." Oliver's hand trembled as he passed her a rolled-up sketch. "It's all here, but if Bianchi finds it—" Miriam's grip on his arm was fierce. "He won't, not if you keep silent, or else." The threat hung like a guillotine, and they parted swiftly, Miriam vanishing into Trastevere's labyrinth, while Oliver lingered, staring into the river as if it might swallow his fears. Miss Marple's heart raced as she retreated, the encounter igniting her suspicions. The vase, likely the Etruscan piece Moretti and Reginald had quarrelled over, was no mere artifact. A forgery or a treasure worth killing for? Oliver's role, artist or accomplice, mirrored a St. Mary Mead painter who had hidden stolen gems in his canvases, betrayed by a single reckless stroke. She hurried back to the hotel, the city's pulse echoing her own, knowing the next hours would be perilous. Morning brought the group to the Pantheon, its ancient dome looming like a watchful eye. The air was heavy with the scent of wax and whispered prayers, but the tourists' murmurs couldn't mask the group's fraying nerves. Sophia, her face drawn, spoke of the oculus with forced calm, while Dr. Thornton's lecture on Roman engineering carried a manic edge. His eyes flicking to Miriam. Oliver sketched the marble floor feverishly, avoiding Miriam's gaze, while Reginald Forbes, his face flushed and tie askew, paced outside, his cigarette unlit. Miss Marple, seated with her knitting, watched him closely. His trembling hands recalled Mr. Grayson, the village grocer, who had quaked when cornered over missing funds. As the group posed for a photo beneath the portico, a scream shattered the moment. Reginald clutched his throat, his cigarette tumbling as he collapsed against a column, gasping, his eyes wild with terror. "Poison!" he choked, his voice a ragged whisper. Foam flecked his lips, and his body convulsed as Dr. Thornton and Oliver lunged to his side. Sophia's cry pierced the air, drawing a crowd. A tourist doctor administered adrenaline, and Reginald's breathing steadied, but his face remained ashen. "The wine!" he rasped, pointing to a glass from a nearby cafe. Its contents spilled on the stones and gone. Inspector Bianchi arrived, his moustache twitching with grim purpose, and secured the glass. "Cyanide," he confirmed, his voice low. A small dose, meant to warn, not kill. The group was herded back to the hotel, the air thick with dread. Bianchi's interrogation zeroed in on Sophia, her Vatican connections raising questions about cyanide used in archival restoration. "I was with Oliver all morning," she insisted, her voice breaking, her alibi backed by the hotel concierge. Bianchi's eyes narrowed, scanning the others. Dr. Thornton's clenched jaw, Miriam's rigid posture, Oliver's averted gaze. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her mind racing. The failed poisoning was no accident. It was a message, like the poisoned tea that had nearly claimed Widow Crane in St. Mary Mead. The killer is growing bold, she thought, or desperate. Over tea with Lady Constance, Miss Marple's voice was low, urgent. "The vase is the heart of it, Constance. Moretti's death, the vendor's murder, now Reginald's brush with death. All orbit it." Constance's eyes widened. "A smuggling ring." Miss Marple's needles paused. "Or a treasure, older than Rome itself, hidden like the coins in Widow Crane's garden. Someone is tying up loose ends." She recalled Dr. Thornton's lecture on ancient toxins, his samples of herbal compounds that could mimic cyanide's bite. And Miriam's vial, its aceto label, gnawed at her, like the mislabeled arsenic that had killed a St. Mary Mead seamstress. At dinner, the dining room was a pressure cooker. Reginald, pale but defiant, drank heavily, his eyes darting to Dr. Thornton. Sophia clung to Oliver, her engagement ring glinting like a warning. Miriam's composure was a mask, her fingers brushing her locket with a nervous tick. Miss Marple seized a moment, her voice gentle but piercing. "Mr. Forbes, did Moretti ever speak of the eagle's eye?" Reginald's glass froze mid-air, his gaze locking with Dr. Thornton's for a split second. "He hinted at a treasure," he stammered. "Said it was hidden where eyes don't see." Bianchi, dining nearby, leaned in, but Reginald retreated into silence, claiming a headache. Later in the lounge, Miss Marple lingered, her knitting a shield for eavesdropping. Dr. Thornton's whisper to Miriam was laced with panic. "If Forbes talks, it's over." Miriam's reply was a venomous hiss. "Then make sure he doesn't." The words sent a chill through Miss Marple, echoing a St. Mary Mead blackmailer's threat before a fatal fall. The eagle's eye, artifact or watcher, loomed larger, its meaning tantalizingly close. The sketches, the vial, the near-fatal wine, all pointed to a conspiracy rooted in Rome's ancient heart, and Miss Marple felt the noose tightening, not just around the guilty, but around them all. Chapter 5. Echoes of Betrayal. The Capitoline Museum stood atop their ancient hill like silent sentinels, their marble halls steeped in the weight of centuries. Miss Jane Marple moved through the galleries with her characteristic quiet grace, her knitted shawl a soft contrast to the gleaming statues that watched the tour group with unseeing eyes. The murders of Carlo Moretti and Giovanni Rousseau, followed by the chilling attempt on Reginald Forbes's life, had frayed the group's nerves to a taut thread. The Eternal City, with its labyrinth of secrets, seemed to tighten its grip, and Miss Marple's sharp mind, honed by the petty intrigues of St. Mary Mead, sensed a crescendo approaching. Her knitting needles, tucked into her bag, were still for now, but her blue eyes missed nothing. Every glance, every tremor, every lie. The morning's private viewing had been arranged through Sophia Rossi's Vatican connections, granting access to a restricted collection of Etruscan artifacts. Sophia, newly released on bail after intense police scrutiny, led the group with a fragile poise, her voice trembling as she described a bronze urn etched with warriors. Her dark eyes, shadowed by sleepless nights, avoided Inspector Luca Bianchi, who lingered at the group's edge, his moustache a stern line. Oliver Blake, her fiancé, hovered protectively, his sketchbook open but untouched, his fingers twitching as if resisting some unseen urge. Dr. Elias Thornton, his tweed jacket dusted with chalk, expounded on the urn's provenance with a fervour that bordered on obsession, while his wife, Miriam, examined a display of jewelled pins, her fingers lingering as if calculating their worth. Reginald Forbes, still pale from his brush with cyanide, kept to the rear, his usual bluster replaced by a haunted vigilance. Miss Marple, pausing before a statue of Minerva, engaged Reginald in conversation, her tone deceptively gentle. "Mr. Forbes, did Moretti ever press you about that Etruscan vase?" she asked, her eyes soft but piercing. Reginald's hand jerked, nearly dropping his cigarette case. He claimed I'd bought a fake," he muttered, his voice low. "Said he had proof, letters, documents, that could ruin me." His admission hung in the air, and Miss Marple noted the sweat beading on his brow, much like the St. Mary Mead solicitor who had confessed to falsifying a will under pressure. Blackmail, then, was Moretti's game. But whose secrets had he threatened? In a side gallery, a sharp exchange drew her attention. Miriam, her face taut, confronted Dr. Thornton beside a case of ancient daggers. "Your obsession will destroy us, Elias," she hissed, her voice barely audible. "Those fines are all we have left." Thornton's laugh was bitter, his eyes glinting with defiance. "Without them, we're bankrupt, my dear. You know that." Miss Marple, half hidden behind a marble bust, felt a chill. Their words echoed a St. Mary Mead scandal, where a doctor's greed had led to poisoned prescriptions, masked as accidents. Could the Thorntons' marriage conceal a darker partnership? The group's tension peaked as they moved to the Palazzo dei Conservatori, where a bronze she-wolf glowered over the room. Oliver, sketching the statue's fierce lines, seemed distracted, his pencil faltering. Sophia, beside him, clutched a guidebook too tightly, her knuckles white. Miss Marple's gaze lingered on Miriam, who slipped a small object, a carved amulet, into her handbag, her movements swift and secretive. The vial of aceto Miss Marple had glimpsed earlier flashed in her mind, its purpose still a nagging question. Was it a tool of deception, like the mislabeled tonic that had felled a St. Mary Mead spinster? As evening fell, the group planned a photo at the Trevi Fountain, its cascading waters a glittering backdrop under the city lights. The crowd was thick with tourists tossing coins, their laughter a stark contrast to the group's grim mood. Oliver positioned himself to sketch the scene, but as the camera clicked, a sudden groan shattered the moment. A scaffold above, laden with restoration tools, shuddered and collapsed, its iron frame plummeting toward Oliver. He dove aside, his sketchbook flying into the fountain's basin, pages scattering like leaves. The crowd screamed, and Bianchi's men cordoned off the area, their faces grim. "Sabotage," Bianchi muttered, examining a severed rope. "This was no accident." The sketchbook, retrieved sodden from the water, revealed a startling find. Detailed drawings of underground tunnels beneath Rome, marked with a symbol, a stylized eagle's eye. Bianchi's eyes narrowed as he studied them, and Oliver stammered, "They're just studies, imaginings from the Forum." But Miss Marple, standing quietly, saw the fear in his eyes, like that of a St. Mary Mead lad caught sketching stolen goods. The eagle's eye, Moretti's dying clue, pointed to a hidden place, perhaps a vault, and someone had tried to silence Oliver before he could reveal more. Back at the hotel, the atmosphere was electric with dread. Bianchi interrogated Oliver, whose protests of innocence rang hollow against the damning sketches. Sophia, tears streaking her face, vouched for him, but her voice cracked under the weight of doubt. Dr. Thornton, unusually subdued, avoided his wife's gaze, while Miriam's composure was a brittle mask, her fingers twisting her locket. Reginald, nursing a brandy, muttered about cursed relics and refused to meet anyone's eyes. Miss Marple, sipping tea with Lady Constance, shared her thoughts in a low murmur. It's a web, Constance, woven with greed and fear. The vase, the tunnels, the eagle's eye, they're linked, like the stolen silver in the vicar's safe. Constance's eyes widened. You think Oliver's the killer? Miss Marple shook her head, her needles resuming their rhythm. Not the killer, perhaps, but a pawn. Someone used his talent, just as they used Moretti's greed and Rousseau's witness. Her mind turned to the Thorntons. Dr. Thornton's expertise in ancient toxins, Miriam's secretive amulet and vial. The scaffold's fall was no random act. It was a desperate move to protect a secret buried deep in Rome's underbelly. As the group dispersed to their rooms, Miss Marple lingered in the lounge, her knitting a pretext for observation. She overheard a hushed exchange between Dr. Thornton and Reginald near the fireplace. "You should have kept quiet about Moretti," Thornton growled. "Now we're all at risk." Reginald's voice was a hoarse whisper. "I didn't sign up for murder, Elias." The words sent a shiver through Miss Marple, recalling a St. Mary Mead farmer's confession before a fatal harvest. The eagle's eye, she mused, was more than a clue. It was a beacon, drawing the guilty into the light. The night stretched taut, the city's pulse a heartbeat of suspense. Miss Marple knew the next move would be decisive. A confrontation, a confession, or another deadly strike. The Eternal City's secrets were unraveling, and she stood ready to pull the final thread, her quiet resolve as unyielding as the stones beneath Rome's ancient streets. Chapter 6. The Labyrinth. Beneath, the air in the Roman catacombs was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of earth and ancient stone, as Miss Jane Marple descended the narrow steps behind Inspector Luca Bianchi and the tour group. Her sensible shoes echoed softly, her shawl drawn tight against the subterranean chill. The flickering beams of flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating rough-hewn walls etched with faded Christian symbols. The murders of Carlo Moretti and Giovanni Rousseau, coupled with the near-fatal poisoning of Reginald Forbes and the sabotaged scaffold at the Trevi Fountain, had woven a tapestry of terror around the group. Miss Marple's keen mind, sharpened by the intrigues of St. Mary Mead, sensed the threads converging here, in Rome's hidden depths, where secrets lay buried like the bones around them. Inspector Bianchi, his stern face softened by the dim light, had reluctantly allowed Miss Marple to join the expedition, after her insights into the eagle's eye clue proved invaluable. The sodden sketchbook, retrieved from the fountain, had revealed Oliver Blake's drawings of underground tunnels, marked with that cryptic symbol, a clue to a hidden vault, perhaps, tied to the Etruscan vase at the heart of the killings. The group moved cautiously. Dr. Elias Thornton led with an archaeologist's confidence, his voice echoing as he identified ancient inscriptions. Miriam Thornton, hers, face pale, clutched her handbag tightly. Sophia Rossi, her eyes haunted, stayed close to Oliver, whose nervous glances betrayed his fear. Reginald Forbes, still shaken, trailed behind. His breathing laboured in the stale air. Miss Marple observed them all, her mild demeanour masking a mind racing with connections. The catacombs, with their maze-like passages, reminded her of a St. Mary Mead mystery, where a hidden cellar had concealed stolen heirlooms. Places like this, she thought, keep secrets better than people. Dr. Thornton paused at a junction, his flashlight illuminating a faded mosaic of an eagle, its eye a single gleaming opal. "The eagle's eye," he declared, his voice tinged with excitement. "It's said to mark a vault used by early Christians to hide relics from invaders." Bianchi's eyes narrowed, and Miss Marple noted Thornton's enthusiasm. Genuine scholarship, or a cover for something darker? The group pressed deeper, the air growing colder, the silence broken only by dripping water and their own uneven steps. At a low chamber, they found it. A stone door, half concealed by rubble, its surface carved with an eagle clutching a scroll. Dr. Thornton's hands trembled as he traced the carving, muttering about Etruscan influences. Bianchi's men cleared the debris, revealing a rusted lock. As they worked, Reginald's voice broke the tension. "This is madness, Thornton. Moretti died for this, didn't he?" His accusation hung in the air, and Thornton's face darkened. "You're the one who dealt with him, Forbes. Don't pin this on me." Before Bianchi could intervene, Miriam stepped forward, her composure cracking. "Enough, both of you! You're fools if you think this vault holds salvation." Her outburst drew every eye, and Miss Marple caught the glint of the amulet she'd seen Miriam pocket at the museum, now dangling from her neck. Oliver's sketchbook, still in Bianchi's possession, lay open on a nearby ledge, its tunnel map aligning perfectly with their path. Like the smuggler's chart in old Mr. Harrow's attic, Miss Marple mused, recalling a village case where a map had betrayed a thief. The door yielded with a groan, revealing a chamber lined with artifacts. Etruscan vases, bronze figurines, and gold jewellery, some pristine, others crude forgeries. The group gasped, but Bianchi's voice was sharp. "This is a smuggler's cache. Moretti's work, no doubt." As the inspector catalogued the find, a scuffle erupted. Reginald lunged at Thornton, seizing his collar. "You knew about this. You and Moretti planned to sell fakes." Thornton shoved him back, his face contorted. "You're no saint, Forbes. You funded this operation." Miss Marple's voice, soft but commanding, cut through the chaos. "Gentlemen, please. Dr. Thornton, you're an expert, but not the killer." Her eyes turned to Miriam, who stood frozen, her hand clutching the amulet. "Mrs. Thornton, that amulet, it's no mere trinket, is it?" Miriam's face drained of colour, and Bianchi's gaze snapped to her. "It's a keepsake," she stammered, but her trembling fingers betrayed her. Miss Marple's mind flashed to a St. Mary Mead widow who had hidden stolen pearls in a locket, her guilt revealed by a single slip. Bianchi's men searched Miriam's handbag, uncovering the vial labelled acedo, revealed to be a diluted cyanide solution, enough to poison, but not always kill. "You silenced Russo," Bianchi said, his voice cold, "and tried to silence Forbes." Miriam's eyes darted to Oliver, who flinched. "I didn't act alone," she spat, her voice venomous. "Ask him about the sketches." Oliver paled, shaking his head. "I only drew what I saw. Tunnels, artifacts. I didn't know." Miss Marple stepped forward, her tone gentle but unyielding. "Mrs. Thornton, you used Oliver's sketches to navigate the tunnels, didn't you? Moretti was your partner in smuggling, but he grew greedy, threatening to expose you. You stabbed him with the stolen dagger, framing the museum theft. Russo saw too much. So you poisoned him. And Forbes, his knowledge of the forgeries made him a threat. Miriam's composure shattered, her shoulders sagging as Bianchi signalled his men. But Miss Marple wasn't finished. The eagle's eye was Moretti's clue to this vault, wasn't it? You thought you could control the treasure, but greed betrayed you. Miriam's eyes blazed, but she said nothing as the handcuffs clicked. Dr. Thornton stared at his wife, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. Sophia clung to Oliver, tears streaming, while Reginald sank onto a stone ledge, muttering, "I should have stayed in London." As the group emerged into the night air, Rome's lights glittering above, Miss Marple felt the weight of resolution. The catacombs had yielded their secret, but the human cost, greed, betrayal, murder, echoed the tragedies of her quiet village. Like the stolen chalice in St. Mary's crypt, she thought, it's always the heart's desires that lead to ruin. Bianchi, escorting Miriam to a waiting car, nodded to Miss Marple with grudging respect. "Signorina, you see what we miss." She smiled faintly, her mind already turning to the final reckoning, where all threads would be laid bare. The hotel loomed ahead, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the underground. Miss Marple knew the group's ordeal was not over. Questions lingered. Dr. Thornton's role, Oliver's complicity, Sophia's unspoken fears. The Eternal City held its breath, and she, with her quiet wisdom, stood ready to unravel the final knot in this deadly tapestry. Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. The grand salon of the Hotel Imperial glowed with the soft flicker of chandeliers, their light dancing across gilded mirrors and velvet drapes. Miss Jane Marple sat in a high-backed chair, her knitting needles idle in her lap, her mild blue eyes scanning the assembled tour group with the quiet intensity of one who had unravelled countless secrets in the lanes of St. Mary Mead. The air was thick with anticipation. The murders of Carlo Moretti and Giovanni Russo, the attempt on Reginald Forbes's life, and the near-fatal scaffold collapse of the Trevi Fountain hanging over them like a storm ready to break, the discovery of the smuggler's vault in the catacombs, and Miriam Thornton's arrest for the killings had brought the group to this moment. A reckoning orchestrated by Miss Marple, with Inspector Luca Bianchi's stern approval. The group sat in a tense semicircle, their faces etched with exhaustion and dread. Sophia Rossi, her dark eyes red-rimmed, clutched Oliver Blake's hand, her engagement ring catching the light like a faint warning. Oliver, his sketchbook absent for the first time, stared at the floor, his youthful features drawn. Dr. Elias Thornton, his tweed jacket crumpled, sat apart, his gaze fixed on the empty space where his wife should have been. Reginald Forbes, nursing a brandy, shifted uncomfortably, his florid face betraying a man who sensed the noose tightening. Lady Constance Hargreaves, ever loyal, sat beside Miss Marple, her pearls glinting as she whispered, "Jane, you've a knack for this. It's like a parish meeting, only far graver." Inspector Bianchi stood by the fireplace, his moustache a stern line, his dark eyes sweeping the room. "Signorina Marple has observations to share," he announced, his voice cutting through the murmur of the group. "Her insights led us to the vault and to Signora Thornton's confession, but questions remain." All eyes turned to Miss Marple, who folded her hands calmly, her voice soft but carrying the weight of truth. "It began with greed," she said, her tone gentle yet unyielding, as it so often does. "In my village, I once knew a greengrocer who met his end over a disputed inheritance, left brazenly by the pump for all to see. So it was with Carlo Moretti, stabbed in the open street with a stolen dagger from the Capitoline exhibit. A bold act, meant to silence and to misdirect. She paused, her eyes meeting Bianchi's. The dagger was no random choice. Its emerald-encrusted hilt pointed to wealth, to the black market trade Moretti thrived in. Sophia's breath hitched, and Miss Marple's gaze softened. Signorina Rossi, your uncle's dealings with Moretti were honest, but they drew you into a dangerous orbit. Moretti was blackmailing someone with much to lose. Her eyes flicked to Reginald, who stiffened, his brandy glass trembling. Mr. Forbes, you admitted Moretti had documents that could ruin you. Proof of forged relics you'd purchased, perhaps knowingly to bolster your investments. Reginald's face reddened. I told you, he tried to swindle me, he blustered, but his voice faltered under Miss Marple's steady gaze. She continued, undeterred. Giovanni Russo, the vendor, saw the killer's silhouette at the Trevi fountain. His death by cyanide-laced gelato was no coincidence. It silenced a witness. And then, Mr. Forbes, your own brush with cyanide, a warning, not a killing dose, suggested someone feared your knowledge. Dr. Thornton's head snapped up, his voice hoarse. You can't think I had a hand in this. My wife. He stopped, his face crumpling. Miss Marple's tone remained gentle. Dr. Thornton, your expertise in ancient toxins was invaluable, but it was your wife who acted. Miriam Thornton was Moretti's partner in smuggling Etruscan forgeries, hiding them in the catacombs vault marked by the eagle's eye. When Moretti demanded a larger share, threatening to expose her, she stabbed him, using the stolen dagger to cast suspicion on the museum. The room was silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Oliver's hands clenched, and Sophia's grip on him tightened. Miss Marple's eyes turned to them. Mr. Blake, your sketches were innocent studies of Rome's beauty, until Miriam saw their use. She needed maps of the tunnels to move her treasures, and you unwittingly provided them. The scaffold at the Trevi was meant for you, to silence any chance you'd piece it together. Oliver's face drained of colour, his voice a whisper. I didn't know what she was doing. Bianchi stepped forward, holding up the sodden sketchbook. These drawings led us to the vault, but they also marked you as a threat, Signore Blake. Miss Marple nodded. The eagle's eye was Moretti's dying clue, a mosaic in the catacombs, hiding a cache of genuine and forged relics. Miriam thought she could control it, but greed betrays, as it did in St. Mary Mead when a doctor's wife hid stolen silver in her sewing box. Sophia's voice broke the silence, trembling but fierce. But why me? Why was I suspected? Miss Marple's smile was kind. Your Vatican connections made you a convenient scapegoat, my dear. Miriam planted doubts, knowing the police would look to your access to cyanide used in restorations. But your alibi held, and truth, like water, finds its level. Dr. Thornton's voice was a low growl. Miriam acted alone then. Miss Marple's eyes met his, steady and unyielding. Not entirely alone in intent, perhaps. You knew of the forgeries, didn't you? Your lectures on Etruscan art, your samples of ancient compounds, they masked a deeper involvement, but murder was her choice. Thornton's shoulders sagged, his silence a confession of complicity. Reginald slammed his glass down, his voice shaking. I never wanted this. Moretti's threats, the fakes. I was in over my head. Miss Marple's voice remained calm. Greed blinds Mr. Forbes, as it did a St. Mary Mead banker who thought he could outwit a swindler. You survived because the killer's hand faltered. Miriam's absence loomed large, her confession in the Vue catacombs sealing her fate. Bianchi spoke, his voice grim. Signora Thornton admitted to the murders, and the attempt on Signore Forbes. The amulet she wore, a stolen piece from the vault, was her undoing. Miss Marple nodded, her mind drifting to a village locket that had hidden a thief's guilt. "Human nature," she said softly, "is the same in Rome as in my village. Greed, fear, betrayal. They weave the same deadly pattern." As the group dispersed, Bianchi escorted them to their rooms, his men stationed outside. Lady Constance squeezed Miss Marple's hand. "Jane, you're a marvel. Rome will never forget you." Miss Marple smiled faintly, packing her knitting. "Nor I it, Constance. Cities change, but people do not." The Eternal City's secrets had been laid bare, and as she gazed out at the moonlit Colosseum, Miss Marple felt the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle solved, its pieces as timeless as the stones beneath her feet.